Hello and welcome to Soul's Compass Healing. My name is Brianne Lazinski and I am here to talk with you about this full moon in Libra lunar eclipse. Before we get into it though, you might have noticed that Soul's Compass Healing now has a logo. Things are getting official. It's exciting. My dear friend Morgan designed it, and she is so gifted in creating beauty in the world, and I feel just ecstatic with what she created. I feel like it reflects me and how I do the work that I do quite well. And so check it out. Follow me on Instagram if you want to read the post that explains a bit more about it. I would love to hear what you have to say. And yeah, I also offer free 15-minute discovery calls. So if you're interested in booking to have a reading with me, but you're not entirely sure if it's the right fit, or you just have any questions in general, we can have a chat about it. You can book that through my website in the description below. And I think without further ado, we are going to dive into today. Is the last day of our Pisces sun, and tomorrow we are moving into the astrological new year of Aries season. My personal favorite, if I must say. So there is, before I get into the sort of deeper meaning of eclipse and stuff like that, I want to just talk about this week. So the eclipse is not happening until March 25th. On the 19th, when our sun moves into Aries, Venus will be opposing Juno. And 2 days later, Venus will be conjunct Saturn. And so this energy leading up to this full moon lunar eclipse in Libra will still be very active during the full moon. And south nodal eclipses they're like blasts from the past, right? It's like time to relive, remember, review the past. And since it's in Libra, it's the past relationships or relating dynamics, right? And so with this opposition to Juno retrograde, there is a pull to inwardly reflect on relationships and our relating patterns, combined with this unsettled sense that some things have to change. Not because perfection is a worthy goal. Rather, because we've noticed that something in our relationships and relating patterns is unhealthy. And this can range from putting up with abuse to the pattern of self-sacrifice and give, and never receiving anything back in relationships, therefore there being no mutual building and upliftment and reciprocity. It could be so many different things, right? And that's going to be unique to each and every one of us. And so with this Venus conjoin Saturn in Pisces, there is this ripping off of the rose-colored glasses, right? The famous, Pisces superpower of disillusionment, so that we can actually see the reality of our relationships, see the reality of our relating dynamics. And so with Venus, the ruler of the south node, as I said, conjunct Saturn and opposing Juno, this is coming into full view. And it's time to shake off the unhealthy relating dynamics of the past while loosening our grips on illusions, fantasy, and the ideal world. So some of us may have already had the stunned, painful experience of disillusionment and are deep in the work of unlearning our unhealthy relating patterns. And even at this stage, Care is required to not stay limited by ideals. Like, my ideal relationship would be like this, A, B, C, etc. And missing the critical step of actually making it so, making it real. So how do we move from a place of disillusionment to making real changes in our relating patterns so that we have less history repeating itself? I'd like to hear from you if you have any ideas about how to do this. How do we move forward from a place of disillusionment so that we have less automatic, unconscious history repeating itself? Okay? And just a little note on eclipses is, okay, so the lunar eclipses happen on the south node, right? And this is what we have coming up next week. It brings up issues of the past. Personal experience, whatever comes up, will reveal itself, so that it can be integrated, right? It's like whatever we notice coming up this week leading up to this potent full moon lunar eclipse, whatever reveals itself during these next couple of weeks is revealing itself on purpose for a reason. And we all have free will. We can choose to leave our rose-colored glasses on if we want. You can totally do that. If you're not ready, you do you. You know? There just might not be any growth coming from that. You just might be continuing to experience the same old shit in your relationships. And, you know, for some of us, that's just where we're at. that's kind of it. There's no judgment there. It's just, it's hard to change relational dynamics. It is so hard because we're up against people judging us like, oh, you've changed, oh, you're putting up boundaries now, I never get to see you, or you're just doing this because of you are so blah blah blah. You know, it's like meeting all of this resistance in our relationships because we as humans are so habituated to familiarity, right? Change is hard. It is the unknown. And so changing relational dynamics, you know, it's hard. You know, it's one thing to change the self, and then when we go to integrate that in relationships, you know, it's like yeah, it's like, okay, so we made changes in ourself, you know, we pushed through the barrier of resistance in ourself to make some sort of change, some sort of evolutionary step forward, and it's like, woohoo, like that was hard, I felt the resistance and I did it anyways, and like I'm feeling new things in my body, in my emotions, I'm thinking new thoughts, you know, all of this. And then you go to, you know, to try to do that in relationships, and it's like you meet another wall of resistance, right? It's like people aren't ready for this relational dynamic to shift at all. People were cozy where it was. It was, you know, it was actually not rosy, but it was cozy because it was familiar. You know, it was actually quite painful, but the act of changing something to reduce the pain just seems so overwhelming to some that actually taking that step to create that change in our relational patterns can be very difficult. And what we will be leaning into with this north node, so the solar eclipses always happen on the north node, and this is to anchor in the presence of what is to be integrated for our steps forward. And so with the north node being in Aries, conjunct Chiron, there is this, we have to be okay going at it alone. That's an option. It's a choice that we can make, and it can make changing relational dynamics possible. It doesn't mean that we have to go it alone forever. It doesn't mean that we're going to be the lone wolf wandering the desert until the end of time. It means that there might be a period of time where our number of relationships might be lessening as we increase our boundaries, as we stand up and speak our truth, right? And so this is what I want to talk about in terms of changing the trajectory of something, okay? So evolutionary astrology is natural law. We all know that when you're driving your car and you got the foot on the accelerator pedal, you are going to be accelerating. And when you take the foot off of the pedal and you coast, the car is going to continue moving in the direction that it was going. The only way that you can shift the trajectory of that momentum, that physical force that is going to continue moving forward, is if you move the steering wheel, right? And this can be done very, very gently, folks. We don't need to be like, that'll be too overwhelming for the system. And we will go back into our familiar trauma responses and stay stuck somewhere. So just a gentle nudge of the steering wheel can change the overall trajectory, right? That momentum, that force is there. Soul is a force. Evolution is a force. And it will continue going on the same path that it has been on unless we take that moment and shift the steering wheel. And this happens by getting present. It doesn't happen by ruminating over the past or being anxious about the future. It is the present moment. That present moment of taking our hand and touching the steering wheel, that shift in direction can occur. And that's the north node solar eclipse action that we will be talking more about next time. Next time I talk at the camera in the beautiful forest. Okay, what else? Okay, so this Libra full moon, lunar eclipse, is happening with the Sun conjunct Hygeia and Neptune in Pisces. It's happening quite close to the North Node, of course, conjunct Chiron. The moon is in first quarter square to Vesta, so this can be revealing what requires work or focused attention and dedication in our relationships. The moon is in disseminating trine to Pluto in Aquarius, so there is this strong evolutionary pull and can equally be a strong evolutionary resistance to changing our relating patterns. There is, the moon is in full sexy quadrate to Chariklo. So there is space being held for outdated and hurtful relating patterns to become illuminated. It's not easy, you know. That's a sexy quadrate aspect. It's called a square and a half for a reason, you know? It's like taking time on this lunar eclipse to hold space for what actually does come up. Actually being open, you know, to feeling our emotions, like I was alluding to in the new moon video that seeded this whole month. When we, yeah, I'll get more into that later. This ruler of our south node, of course, is Venus, and she is very amazingly placed during this time. She, as I spoke to before, is conjunct Saturn. She is also in balsamic semi-sextile to the north node and Chiron. So there is this flavor, very, very heavy flavor of releasing and of letting go of our old relating patterns in order to prepare for the new relating patterns to instinctually form and take shape. And so Venus is also in gibbous in conjunct the south node. So this clearly demonstrates that this south nodal lunar eclipse can be that sort of stereotypical eclipse where crisis occurs. Crisis in relationship occurs to bring... Oh, okay. Sorry. Pretty sure I know those fishermen there. Anyways, crisis in relationships will be occurring. Most likely. You know, I don't want to be like, hey, you're going to have a crisis in your relationships. I don't know. But the flavor is certainly there, right? That there can be some sort of at the very least, some sort of awkward integration point making itself very known. Venus is also in new phase, semi-sextile to Chariklo, exactly. So again, this is furthermore accentuating my point about creating space to really view relationships and relating dynamics and patterns, both inwardly and with others. Venus is in third quarter Venus is third quarter sextile to a Uranus and Jupiter conjunction. So this can go a few different ways. One option is that there is a bird's eye view seeing, an objective seeing of the relating dynamics that require changes, and therefore aligning with the self-reliance one needs in order to make those changes. Or it can take shape in terms of like a rigidity or a stuckness in ways that we have been relating, and therefore the rug gets ripped out from under our feet, enforcing an inner dependence in self-reliance rather than codependency. Okay? So either way, it's like pointing to change. And we do have a certain level of free will, of course, if we are ready to make that change. If we see that change, we can enact it most likely with a little bit less shock to the system. than when that change forces itself into our life, right? Mars, the ruler of our north node, is exactly new phase semi-sextile to Pluto. So here again we have this instinctual realigning of desires to change our trajectory, change our evolutionary path. Mars is also first quarter sexy quadrate the south node, and third quarter semi-square the north node. So for this south node lunar eclipse, there is tremendous tension involved when carving out one's freedom and individuality in relationships, for reasons that I've already talked about, and I'm sure there are many reasons that you can come up with yourself, given your particular circumstances. One other thing that I would like to point out is that on April 1st, Mercury goes retrograde at 27 degrees Aries and will remain retrograde until April 25th. So this retrograde period happening on the North Node during this eclipse season is very potent. And I'm going to be talking about that more in the next one, but I definitely did want to mention it here and just give a heads up. So the South Node in Libra, you know, especially given what I just talked about with Mercury going retrograde soon, we can really be learning that doing the shadow Libra thing, which is turning a blind eye to the unhealthy relational dynamics or keeping the peace in relationships through people pleasing and sacrificing our authenticity in order to do that. Is it really keeping the peace when there's a war going on inside of you? That is my question. In an ideal world, there wouldn't be fill in the blank. People who piss me off, people who betray me, etc., etc. This is a problematic sentence because that ideal world is not real. So pretending that we live in this ideal world is at the root dissociation. And what is dissociation? It is the inherent protective mechanism built into human biology. It is a response to trauma. So when it becomes overwhelming to be in the body, autopilot goes switch on, spirit leaves the body, and we become dissociated. Talked about this many times in these videos because I want to normalize it, because most of us are living in a dissociated state. Some of us have been living in this state our whole entire lives. And so no wonder this ideal world is projected onto reality, because that's all the body and spirit has capacity for, right? If nobody's home, then I'm going to make my perception have these rose-colored glasses that tell me that people are nice to me, that I am going to continually care for people because there's so many ways that people care for me, right? And I say this with a ton of compassion because it's so hard. It's so hard. When dissociation is used for long periods of time, it can enable one to remain stuck in unhealthy relationships, just as well as it can help one survive situations where exiting the unhealthy relationship is not possible. So it can be very helpful, and it can also be very harmful. Either way, there is a level of stuckness and limitation when dissociation is activated. And so, with this Venus conjunct Saturn opposing Juno and Black Moon Lilith retrograde, and Mars will be following Venus's path, and will be making all of these aspects to all of these symbols too, very shortly here. We see how the rulers of the moon's nodes are showing us these major themes of this eclipse season. Dissociation, fantasyland, living in the ideal world, this limits one's growth. Keeping the peace limits your growth. An opposition is like a tug of war. One side will win. And so for this lunar eclipse, while we are reliving, reviewing relationships, take time to feel your emotions as the dynamics of the relationship dance along, rather than just going through the motions of the relationship. That's coming back to that present moment trajectory turning point, gently holding the steering wheel that I was talking about. Because when the autopilot gets switched off and reality makes itself known via our relationships being felt and processed, this creates the space to move forward in our personal power. Okay? This is the leading edge of our evolutionary journey right now, and will be prepping us for this very important solar eclipse on the moon's north node, which will be happening on April 8th. And I very much look forward to discussing that with you next time. Thank you so much for listening. I sincerely hope that all of this makes sense. Please let me know in the comments your thoughts, what's going on for you, if you feel comfortable sharing. Otherwise, you can always shoot me an email via my website. I am here for you. I would love to connect. So, thank you so much for watching. Please share this video with others. I am really hoping that my work will expand out like a spider web and reach more and more people, because that's why I'm doing it, right? Is to be of service. So thank you so much for listening and sharing. It really helps me out, and I look forward to feeling all the feels of this eclipse season with you all. Thank you.